The hospital waiting room smelled of antiseptic and desperation. Maria clutched her son's small hand, watching his breath form tiny clouds in the frigid air. The heating system had broken down 3 hours ago, and outside, the winter storm showed no mercy. She pulled her threadbare cardigan tighter, but it did nothing against the bone-deep cold that seemed to seep through the walls. 7-year-old Daniel pressed closer to his mother, his lips tinged with blue. He didn't complain, he never did, but Maria saw the way he trembled, saw how his small body fought against the relentless chill. They'd been waiting for 6 hours now, ever since Daniel's father had been rushed into emergency surgery after the construction accident. 6 hours of uncertainty, of prayers whispered into the void, of trying to stay strong for her boy when everything inside her wanted to crumble. "Mommy's cold," Daniel said softly, his voice barely above a whisper. It wasn't a complaint, just an observation from a child who noticed everything about his mother, who carried wisdom beyond his years because life had forced him to grow up too fast. Maria blinked back tears. "I'm okay, baby. Don't you worry about me." But she wasn't okay. None of this was okay. The medical bills would bury them. Her husband Miguel might not make it through the night. And she couldn't even afford to buy her son a warm meal, let alone a proper coat to shield him from this unforgiving cold. She'd sold her winter coat 2 months ago to pay for Miguel's diabetes medication. The cardigan she wore now had been a gift from a neighbor, meant for spring weather, useless against February's brutal bite. Daniel's jacket had holes in both pockets and a broken zipper that she'd safety pinned shut. They'd made it work because they always made it work, until today, when the universe seemed determined to break them completely. The waiting room was crowded with others like them, people with worn shoes and worried eyes, people who understood that one bad day could unravel an entire life. A television mounted in the corner played the news, more storm warnings, school closures, warnings to stay inside if possible. As if any of them had a choice. Daniel's teeth chattered, and he tried to hide it by pressing his face against Maria's arm. She wrapped both arms around him, trying to transfer whatever warmth she had left in her body to his small frame. She'd give him everything. Her warmth, her breath, her life if it meant he'd be safe. "Tell me the story again, Mommy," Daniel whispered. "About Papa and the birds." Maria's throat tightened, but she forced a smile. It was their ritual, their way of making hard moments bearable. "Which one? When he rescued the baby sparrow or when he built the birdhouse?" "The sparrow. I like that one best." So she told him, her voice soft and steady, about the day Miguel had found a tiny sparrow that had fallen from its nest. How he'd climbed a 20-foot ladder on his lunch break, gently placing the baby bird back with its family. How he'd been late returning to work and lost half a day's pay, but he'd smiled anyway because doing the right thing mattered more than money. "Papa always helps," Daniel said, his eyes drooping with exhaustion. "Yes, he does. And he's going to be okay. He has to be." She didn't know if she believed it, but she said it anyway because sometimes hope is all you have, and you cling to it even when logic tells you to let go. The automatic doors slid open, bringing a fresh blast of Arctic air and a man in an expensive overcoat. He stomped snow from his boots, pulled off leather gloves, and looked around the waiting room with an expression Maria couldn't quite read. He was older, maybe 60, with silver hair and the kind of face that suggested he'd lived a full life, one with both joy and sorrow etched into its lines. The man's eyes swept across the room, taking in the huddled families, the broken heater vent, the frost forming on the windows. His gaze landed on Daniel, and something in his expression shifted. He stared for a long moment, his jaw working as if he was fighting some internal battle. Maria instinctively pulled Daniel closer. She'd learned to be wary of strangers, especially ones who stared too long at her child. But then the man did something unexpected. He walked toward them, his expensive shoes clicking on the linoleum floor. Maria tensed, preparing to grab Daniel and move if necessary. But the man stopped a respectful distance away, his hands visible, his posture non-threatening. "I'm sorry to intrude," he said, his voice rough with emotion. "But I heard your boy say his mommy was cold." Maria lifted her chin, pride mixing with embarrassment. "We're fine, thank you." "No," the man said gently. "You're not. And that's okay, you don't have to be fine all the time." Before Maria could respond, the man began unbuttoning his coat. It was a beautiful thing, Clearly expensive, the kind of coat that probably cost more than Maria made in 3 months. Thick wool, perfectly tailored, with a silk lining that caught the fluorescent lights. Please, he said, holding it out to her. Take it. Maria shook her head immediately. I can't. That's too much. We don't need charity. It's not charity. The man's voice cracked slightly. Please, let me do this. Sir, I appreciate the gesture, but... His name was Daniel too. The words came out in a rush, and suddenly the man's eyes were glistening. My son. He was 7 years old, just like your boy. He had the same dark hair, the same way of looking at the world, like he was trying to understand it all at once. Maria's protest died in her throat. The man swallowed hard. 23 years ago, there was an accident. A drunk driver ran a red light. My wife and I were in the front seat. Daniel was in the back. He was the only one who didn't make it. I'm so sorry, Maria whispered, her own pain momentarily forgotten in the face of his loss. We were arguing, the man continued, the words spilling out like he'd kept them locked away for decades. Something stupid about what restaurant to go to for dinner. Our last words to each other were angry ones. And Daniel, he was in the back seat saying, Mommy's cold, because the heater wasn't working right. Those were some of his last words. Mommy's cold. Daniel had been listening quietly, but now he reached out his small hand toward the stranger. I'm sorry about your Daniel. The man's face crumpled. He knelt down, bringing himself to eye level with the boy. Thank you, son. That means more than you know. He held out the coat again. I've been successful. Very successful. I've made more money than I could spend in 10 lifetimes. I've donated to charities, started foundations, put my name on hospital wings. But you know what? None of it has ever felt like it mattered. Not really. Because I couldn't save my boy, and I couldn't go back and take that coat off my own back to give to my wife when she was cold. He pressed the coat into Maria's hands. But I can do this. Right now, right here, I can be the person I wish I'd been that day. I can listen when a child says his mother is cold, and I can do something about it. Please, you'd be giving me a gift, not the other way around. Maria looked down at the coat in her hands, tears streaming down her face. The weight of it felt like more than just fabric and wool. It felt like grace, like the universe taking pity on them for just one moment. There's a scarf in the pocket, the man added, standing up. And gloves. Please use them. I don't know what to say, Maria managed. Say you'll keep that boy warm. Say you'll tell him stories about people who care, about how kindness isn't dead even when the world feels impossibly cold. Daniel tugged on the man's sleeve. What's your name? Robert, the man said. Robert Chen. Mr. Chen, do you want to sit with us? While we wait. Robert Chen looked surprised, then deeply moved. I'd like that very much. So he sat, this stranger in an expensive suit who'd just given away his coat, and he listened as Daniel told him about his father, about the birds, about his dreams of becoming a veterinarian someday so he could help animals the way his papa helped people. Maria wrapped the coat around both herself and Daniel, the warmth of it seeping into her bones. But more than the physical warmth, she felt something else, a restoration of faith, a reminder that the world still held people who saw suffering and chose to act. An hour later, a doctor emerged through the surgical doors. Mrs. Rodriguez. Maria jumped to her feet, her heart hammering. Daniel grabbed her hand, and Robert Chen stood with them, a quiet presence of support. Your husband made it through surgery, the doctor said, and Maria's knees nearly buckled. He's stable. It was close, but he's going to be okay. The relief hit her like a wave, and she sobbed openly, pulling Daniel into her arms. Robert Chen's hand rested briefly on her shoulder, a gesture of shared joy. Thank you, she whispered to the doctor, to God, to the universe, to this stranger who had reminded her that miracles still happened. As they walked toward Miguel's recovery room, Robert Chen began to follow them, then hesitated. I should let you have this moment as a family. Maria turned back. Mr. Chen, I don't believe in coincidences anymore. I think you were supposed to be here tonight. I think both of our Daniels brought us together for a reason. He smiled, truly smiled, for the first time that evening. Maybe you're right. Later, after they'd seen Miguel, after Robert had insisted on paying their medical bills and setting up a fund for Daniel's education, after they'd exchanged phone numbers and promises to stay in touch, Maria stood in the hospital parking lot wearing a stranger's coat and watching her son play in the snow. Daniel scooped up a handful and shaped it carefully. "Mommy, look, I'm making a snowbird for the other Daniel. So he knows we remember him." Robert Chen, now wearing a hospital blanket around his shoulders and looking ridiculous but content, watched with wonder. "You've raised an incredible boy." "I'm trying," Maria said. "That's all any of us can do, just try to raise good humans who see people's pain and want to help." "You're succeeding." The snow continued to fall, gentle now, covering the world in white. Daniel placed his snowbird on the hood of a car, careful and reverent, the way children are when they know something matters. And in that moment, watching her son honor a child he'd never met, wearing a coat given by a grieving father, knowing her husband would recover, Maria understood something profound. That we are all connected by our capacity to care, by our choice to show up for each other in our coldest moments, by our willingness to take off our own coats when someone else is freezing. "Mommy," Daniel called out, "are you still cold?" She looked at her son, at Robert Chen, at the coat that had become so much more than fabric. "No, baby," she said. "I'm warm now. We're all warm now."